From the recent passing of the Charleston County budget to road projects to infrastructure, those are some of the issues that Charleston County Councilman Brantley Moody is tackling. I talk one-on-one with the councilman for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Charleston County Councilman Brantley Moody, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. It's been a little while, but it's a pleasure to have you here in the Charleston County Historic Courthouse. Yes. It's much better than meeting outside across the street where it's 97 degrees, so happy to have you here in this historic building.
Yes, sir, right here at the Four Corners Lawn, downtown Charleston. I know that Charleston County has been busy. I know you've been busy actually with a lot of road projects, and I want to get to that in just a second, but I want to go back to some relevancy. Okay, let's talk about the budget. Okay, and this is coming from WCSC. Charleston County Council has approved its budget for the next year that comes with raises to property taxes to some areas within the county. So let me ask you this. What exactly are those areas of the county can raise those taxes in?
So Quintin, great question. Those are generally what we call special purpose districts. So for instance, in my district in West Ashley, we have the St. Andrews Public Service District, we have the St. Andrews Parks and Playgrounds. I don't think any of those had a tax increase. Playground may have had a tax decrease, but the Allendale Fire District, for instance, with the growth they're having out there, they need new equipment, new trucks. Their building was antiquated, so they needed to raise their millage to pay for those things.
Wow.
These special purpose districts are sort of they sort of stand alone, but their budgets do come through by state law through county council for approval. So we generally will accept whatever recommendations they have. Now, if it gets out of hand, we will certainly, somebody, probably the council member representing that area would say something. But usually if there's a millage increase, it comes with pretty valid reason.
Wow. So what was this millage before it was actually raised?
I don't know the number of mills they would have. I think the millage increase was like 0.4, maybe even 1% or 1 mill or something like that per, it's usually like per 100,000 or something like that, but I don't know the actual dollar raised.
Now, how many more people are actually moving into that district?
I have no idea.
Okay. So let me ask you this.
I mean, you just look, the growth is going out that way. You know, Allendale was very rural, and they want to stay rural, and the Francis Marion National Forest is a nice buffer over there, but the town of Mount Pleasant has got nowhere to go except out that way. So that's, you know, just like growth in Charleston, North Charleston has nowhere to go except up 26. So the head counts of people, I mean, we could ask the Chamber of Commerce or groups like that how many people are coming to town net daily.
Yes, sir.
It used to be something in the 30s or 40s. Now it may be a little bit less, but where those 30 or 40 people are coming and positioning themselves, I wouldn't have that data.
Now, with the special tax district, and I'm leaving out a word there, exactly how much money do you believe the Charleston County, or do you believe the county will actually receive in the next, say, 5 years?
Well, what they generally will do, and this is very oversimplistic math, is if they need 2 new fire trucks and they need $100,000 worth of equipment, they'll take that total, divide it over how many other residents they have, and say this is the millage increase we need. And it's basically just as simple as that.
So what other recommendations did the fire district come to you all with?
That was it.
That was it,
Yeah,
okay.
they just need a little bit more money to buy equipment and things like that.
And how long was that building antiquated before you all gave them money to build? Okay.
Yeah, we've done some, it seems like we do a new building out there? I don't remember now, but some of the equipment, you know, the uniforms, the helmets, all that stuff. I mean, our folks deserve the best and the safest equipment. They need to have it.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you this. What parts of the county actually have the highest property taxes?
Well, the millage is all the same, but you know, it's based on the value of the house. So that's you know, probably Mount Pleasant, certainly Kiowasi, Big Islands, those places like that where there's high property values. Those are going to be the biggest tax generators.
So is this particular growth in residential and personal property values expected to moderate over the next couple of years?
We don't see it slowing down. When we build our budgets, I know our staff tries to be conservative, and the reason we have been fortunate enough not to have to pay or raise millage in the county is that we've undershot or conservatively estimated the numbers, the taxes, and the growth that's going to happen. So when we get towards the end of the year, everybody in March or April, our fiscal year ends June 30, everybody's a little antsy and nervous until the final numbers come in. And we were pretty adamant, the majority of us on council, bipartisan, that we did not want to raise millage, and staff was able to make that happen and give our staff a meaningful, I think it ended up being about 4.5% pay raise. We have to compete with the private sector too, and we can't outpay the private sector, so we've got to try to be competitive to keep our people well paid for their roles.
So I'm looking at it right now. So versus private sector versus this right here. How many employees have left the county to go to the private sector?
I don't know the answer to that. I believe we have a total of 2,500 generally employees. I mean, that could go up or down 5 or 10, one way or the other, but I think it's hovered around that number for some time.
Wow. And do you see that number fluctuating or dropping?
Well, I hope with this pay raise, I hope it will actually increase. We have a number of roles that continue to be unfilled, especially in law enforcement. I mean, Sheriff Graziano has a number of sheriff's deputies and detention center deputies. We across the board, our public works group is always looking for people. If you have a CDL driver's license, we would love to talk to you. So there's just any number of places across the board where we have roles that need to be filled, and hopefully with this pay raise, that'll help us not only attract our talented people, but recruit new people.
Now, I know I've been keeping up with the news with the sheriff's office as well, but has she come to the county council recently, that is, to ask for more help?
Well, she came in the fall prior to the fiscal year ending, and so elected officials are a little bit different. We give them a bucket of money, and then they manage that bucket of money as they see fit, and then they're accountable to the voters. She was concerned that maybe she wanted to give her people a pay raise, and she was concerned that she might not have enough money to finish the fiscal year. And the message that council sent to her was, well, we're so close to the new budget, new year, let's see how you do. If you run out of money, we will give you some more money, but let's plan for that larger increase to cover it next year. And that's what ended up happening. It worked out fine.
And as we said it right now, what else would you all recommend giving to the sheriff's office if you had to right now?
Well, it's needs based, really. I mean, I can remember my first year or two on council. We were Sheriff Cannon had a 50-year-old helicopter that was about to fall out of the sky, and we needed a new helicopter. So that was not anything that really was budgeted, but it was kind of an urgent need. So it's sort of as needed, but all the elected officials build into their budgets monies for things that they think they're going to need to purchase in the coming years. Now, if they're big purchases like a helicopter, and we know it's coming, we can account for it over a couple of years to pay for it. So that's sort of how we work the budgeting process.
Good to know all that information. And going back to the budget, Councilman, is the revenue growth projected to be at a modest percent, assuming no tax rate increases?
If I understand your question, I believe the answer to that is yes. We still anticipate the number of people moving here. We still anticipate development happening. We still anticipate commercial growth happening, and with that comes added revenues without hopefully having to raise millage, if that's what you're asking.
So where exactly is commercial growth right now in Charleston County?
Well, it's Palmetto Commerce Parkway continues to explode. Concern of mine I've shared with our with our economic development folks is where do we go after that? Because that's where everybody seems to want to go. I would love to see the naval base continue to be built out. That's great infrastructure out there. I'd like to see some more of our industry, maybe not the heavy industrial manufacturing, but more aerospace tech, things like that, maybe office type stuff, move out into the suburbs where people can maybe be closer to work. 83% of people live in my district leave the district to go somewhere for work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then they come back at 5 o'clock. There's your traffic problem. Yep. So if we have more employers that are spread out a little bit, you have a chance to put employers closer to their employees, and that maybe would help alleviate some of our traffic concerns.
In your district, where exactly could that be placed?
Citadel Mall. There's all kinds of infill places along Sam Rittenberg Boulevard. There's an empty Chuck E. Cheese. There's an empty Goodwood. Citadel Mall's got all kinds of places. There's little infills. There's a great new development on Wapu Road in West Ashley. I'm just trying to think where else right off the top of my head. But there's little places, but it's getting pretty full, so it would have to be smaller. Again, you would have to go up maybe to do a 4-story building to put some office there, but those are things I'd like to see happen.
And do any of those areas need to be rezoned?
It could be, again, case-by-case basis. I mean, the city of Charleston is sort of taking care of zoning for the Citadel Mall. Anybody can do just about whatever they want there. I would imagine the zoning for the Chuck E. Cheese and Goodwood is probably some type of heavy commercial, so it may need to be tweaked, but I think you would find a city or a county council very open to rezoning things like that if it would support density and employment opportunities.
And this is a silly question, but is the infrastructure there?
Yes. I mean, it's on major highways. There's buses go by. There's grocery stores. There's housing. There's 526 on one side, 26 on the other. There's great infrastructure right there.
Right there. And let me go back to obviously the budget, because Charleston County Councilman Chairman Herb Sass says the 2023-2024 budget is around 10% larger than last year's. So what are the three biggest expenditures for this particular budget?
The biggest thing was our staff increases. That over and above was the largest thing. There's onesies and twosies everywhere else, but staff pay increases and pay and benefits and things like that compromise the lion's share of the county's budget.
So, what was the preliminary projection of revenues and disbursements for the upcoming fiscal year?
So our budget went from, I think it was about 293-ish to about 320-ish. That's just the general fund.
Yes, sir.
What does that tell you? I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's sort of what the growth was.
And where do you see that growth heading next?
Well, I don't see it slowing down. I mean, it's, interest rates, I work in banking,
Yes,
and interest rates have certainly slowed down the single-family home purchases, but it's not slowing down larger home purchases and construction projects on Keel Island or Daniel Island's not in the county, but higher end things, it's not slowing that down. Tract builders are still gobbling up. Just saw a tract builder bought a big chunk of acreage out on Johns Island. Whether or not they get started and get going, who knows? But we just don't. Every time you think things are going to slow down, something like that, pops. And
wow. So let me ask you this, Dan. How, when it comes to that fiscal year and those revenues and disbursements, how will the estimates actually adjust it?
how would estimates adjust it? Well, a budget is by rule an estimate. Okay, it's a guiding estimate. So once we set the budget, it's set. If we have to change the budget, the council has to come back and do 3 readings. Now, so once the budget is set, we have not, I guess we've amended the budget maybe once or twice since I've been there, but our budget director has been there for 20 some odd years. He and his staff knows sort of where the secrets are, where the secret sauce is about how to get this thing managed. So I don't necessarily worry about estimates changing dramatically.
What budget item, Mr. Councilman, was actually the most difficult to actually change?
I don't know that we changed anything from what staff put together and the administrator presented to us. We make notes and we ask a lot of questions in our budget books, but there were no, I'm sorry, I take that back. Former Chairman Pryor did add a motion to add back some community investment funds, and we approved that. And what that was is, I think it was $250,000 that community organizations can apply to the county to get funding. I think it's like in $10,000 or $15,000 maximums. Okay. It's a very rigid application process, but it's things like, Echo in Mount Pleasant, homeless shelter, organizations like that can apply to receive funding if they're not already funded to some extent. But they can apply to receive funding out of that bucket of money. And that had been eliminated out of the budget. And Chairman Pryor visited with many council members, and we all agreed to put that back in the budget. So we had to make motions to add that back to the budget. So that was really the only change we made from the staff's recommendation.
I know all about Apple because I went there a couple of times.
That's a great organization. Great organization.
There's 2 filled out there. But let me ask you, how many community organizations have signed up with us so far?
Well, I wouldn't be able to tell you that. Our community development group works through that, but there's hundreds of organizations out there, and we went through it with ARPA. I mean, all these organizations, vetting these organizations, making sure they were in good standing with the state, making sure they had a valid tax ID number, had financial statements that were reliable. There's literally hundreds, and so it's just a matter of 2 of us advertising to these organizations that this little bit of money's out here, come and get it. And once it's gone, it's gone. So it's a matter of making sure people know it's there. And
is this going to be every year situation?
Yeah, I think so. We were worried again until we got some late estimates that we were going to exceed revenue projections. That was one of the casualties that we had carved out in case, and when everything kind of came in fine, Councilmember Pryor, I think rightly suggested maybe we ought to consider putting that back, and I supported that.
Now, going back obviously to the budget, Councilman Sass says that they are expecting to raise taxes for homes in some special districts like the St. Paul 5 district. Well, as you mentioned, the rest of the county won't have a tax increase. So how many homes are there in total for this?
I would not have that information. I don't know how many home sites we have in the county.
Okay.
Or in the special purpose districts. I don't have that.
Okay. In what way do you anticipate the general fund revenue increasing compared to 2022?
Well, I mean, there's always cost of living stuff. So everybody, gets a 2 or 3% cost of living increase. So I would imagine that the budget would continue to reflect those type of increases.
Now, where exactly in the county is there, say, strong growth in property assessment values, for instance?
Well, as we talked about earlier, I mean, in the island communities, Sullivan's, Alapoms, Mount Pleasant, Kiowa, Seabrook, those are kind of the big residential areas. But then you talk about commercial districts. I mean, North Charleston is the mountain lion of the state as far as commercial tax revenues go. So it all depends on which bucket you're looking at.
So what percent of the general fund revenues come from the state and federal sources?
I don't know that information.
Okay. And does that actually include still any money from the American Rescue Plan Act?
So no, not in the general fund. I mean, those are different buckets that we really very closely have to monitor, because the downside of those of ARPA money and things like that is if you don't spend it according to the rules, that the government can come back and make you pay that back. And so we put together a wonderful team led by our district Deputy Administrator Christine Durant, who vetted all these programs, and we put a bunch of money in housing. I mean, Councilmember Darby and former Councilmember Johnson were always adamantly advocating for housing, and fixing somebody's roof, building a wheelchair ramp to keep families in their home, fixing a floor that's got holes in it. With that ARPA money, that's just a no-brainer. And so we were happy to do those type of things with that sort of found money, but we really needed to make sure it stayed in that bucket and followed all those rules it had to follow.
And I want to bring you to that question that I have, because what additional resources were actually redirected to the county's affordable housing efforts in order to bring baseline funding?
I think through the ARPA bucket, I mean, we don't have tons of dough laying around, as a lot of people would think, and say, spend more, do more. That's just not the case. So I want to say off the top of my head, it was about 22 to 25 million was right off the bat towards housing. We've spent some others doing some small business cash infusions and things like that. But I wouldn't say that was the number. I would have to follow up with you on that. But that number seems to ring a bell.
And I know that the county has been very successful in winning grants over the recent years.
Yes.
So how do you plan grant requests, that is, and related to the grant matching?
So grant money is required. We've got the sheriff's office, the coroner. We have some offices, elected officials, that really do a great job of looking for grant money. So if the sheriff had one, I think it was for some underwater diving equipment that recently came through, and it was 56, whatever, $75,000, whatever it was. But here's the good news, Quintin. If that money is grant funded, then maybe that frees up some money that she can go do something else if she was on her wish list, or give some people a pay, or something like that. So I've always advocated, if there's grants out there, our people need to be out there looking for them. I don't care if it's a library or what department you work for. You ought to be at the Board of Election. We've got them in a new building, which was much needed. They're at a nasty cinder block building. And I've told Isaac Kramer, I said, there's got to be grant money out there to go find to ensure safe elections and the safety of your staff and things like that. And he's on the hunt. So let's go. If the money's out there, let's go find it.
So speaking of money again, let's talk about how much money is actually in the budget for capital projects.
Okay.
How much are there?
Well, I don't know the number off the top of my head. I mean, we've got the Azalea Complex, we've got Board of Elections, we got Outfit. Are there any residuals from the prior building? I don't know. Ongoing maintenance of all of our buildings. Fleet. I mean, there's 100 different buckets. I don't have that number off the top of my head.
But are some of those projects shovel ready?
Well, when you talk about capital projects, you're talking about transportation projects, or you're talking about buildings and fleet and things like that.
We have buildings and fleets, etc.
So we really don't have many projects that are, building projects that are ongoing. We're finishing some of our library renovations. That's been funded. I know South Windermere, I think, is on the list here shortly. All the new ones have been built and opened, I believe. We've got a handful of renovations. Capital projects, we always have trouble finding cars. I mean, just, cars wear out and they break down, and trying to find new ones. I'm trying to think. It's just always ongoing maintenance. And we're sitting in how old is this building? I don't know, 200-300. I mean, things like this cost a lot to maintain. So those are part of the capital structures as well.
So in what way, Mr. Brantley, do these capital projects actually meet documented public need?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, let's take, for instance, the prior social services building.
Yes.
Okay, we had Deotis, which was downtown. It was former Charleston Hospital, was in terrible shape. We had DSS. We had some other entities that were spread out around the North Charleston area. And so when we built that social services building, it allowed us to combine all of these things to gain efficiencies and put people in nice facilities. And it's going to let us sell that Charleston Center, and we can put that money back into that capital fund bucket to go do other things. So, we don't just build buildings to build buildings. That's not in our public interest. I mean, I mentioned Board of Election voter. That old cinder block building on that crazy road down there had the craggly ramp to get up into. That just was third world for elections these days. So needing to have efficient buildings that work for the departments is important.
So how many of these projects are actually consistent with, say, community development?
Well, I think you'd point to all your libraries. You could point to, again, to the prior social services building. That's all. You know, there's numerous agencies in there that support community development. So all of our buildings are about public support. If you think about it, you know, you come to the courthouse, you see the treasurer, you come to RD's office. We don't build buildings just to. They're all to support the public.
Absolutely. So how many opportunities are there for partnerships being explored with most of these projects?
Well, none. I mean, there was an article recently about the Charleston County Parks and Rec has got some space over at the old Baker Hospital, and they're trying to figure out, you know, how to get in partnership with the city of North Charleston to figure out what comes there. So things like that, one-offs like that, I think are could be the way of future county parks. But as far as you know, county buildings, we don't look to partner with anybody.
Now, what is the valid cost estimate for most of these projects?
Ever escalating. I mean, the cost of everything is going up. I mean, it depends. What, you know, prior building was $66 million. I mean, it's, you know, it just depends on what the cost of materials, the time frame, the bids are at the time. So I mean, I couldn't tell you what any specific future building might cost.
Is inflation affecting it?
Absolutely.
And what way?
Well, everything goes up. I mean, you know, the cost of 526, you know, just how many ever years ago was projected to be 700 something million. Now it's $2 billion. I mean, it's just, that's a small scale. Some of these road projects I'd like to get to when you want to talk to, were, you know, just a turn lane, you know, adding a right-hand turn lane somewhere. I mean, that costs $200,000, $300,000. I mean, it's insane. The paving that we do every year through the transportation sales tax money, it's, you know, it's gotten crazy.
Wow. So how much money have you all actually used within this tax?
I don't know that exact number.
Okay. And how many more projects do you need in your district as far as road projects?
Well, I'd like to have every district. I'd like to have every road project in my district. You know, candidly, I mean, District 7, which now includes Wando Woods, in North Charleston. I've been to a couple of their meetings. First meeting I went to was, you know, 526 is a disaster, and it was. And I'm very thankful that Secretary Hall and DOT, they basically paved from not the airport all the way to Citadel Mall. I mean, the exit ramps were a mess. Everything was a mess. A lot of the roads in West Ashley are you know, they're old, they're misaligned, they're not you know, pedestrian friendly. So we've got a lot of work to do. Wow. We got a lot of projects on the board though too, which are very exciting.
And what are those current projects on the board?
Well, so you mentioned Sycamore. You know that area, Sycamore and St. Andrews Boulevard. You know, where the West Ashley Greenway ends, we will widen that sidewalk. It'll be a widened sidewalk up to Sycamore. They can safely cross, tie in, and go back behind that commercial and reconnect with the Greenway. Yeah. You know, mast arms, and you know, we'll redo the crosswalks and nice mast arm stoplights. That'll be great. The Old Town district, where my home is, that's a two-phase deal. So as you're coming in from the North Bridge, that whole intersection there at Orange Grove and Cosgrove, or Old Town, whatever you want to call it, people call it the Suicide Merge. That whole intersection will be improved, and then phase 2 will move down towards Charlestown Landing. There'll be some new stoplights on the Sam Ritt side that kind of wrap around that whole development there. So that's long overdue. What else we got? Savannah Highway corridor improvements. Oh yes. We've got projects going on all the way from Savage Road, reworking that intersection. DuPont and Wapoo there, DuPont and Stinson, where the Captain D's is. That intersection will be realigned. Wapoo Road and Savannah Highway will be realigned. There'll be a bikeway all the way down to the Greenway now, or sidewalk all the way down to the Greenway. A little more controversial is the Avondale area. We're kind of waiting to get some public feedback and interpret that and see what that looks like. But there's some creative stuff at that intersection as well. So it just will let people, it'll get people out of the area faster, but it also is much more pedestrian friendly for people that want to walk and move around the area.
So what are the phases at this for these particular projects?
Well, they're all in sort of different phases. I mean, as I mentioned, the Savannah Highway capacity, the Stinson project in DuPont was loved. The Wapoo in 17 was loved. So we go right into design. We start, going into that. Now that doesn't mean shovels start flying tomorrow. You hope to bid these things out. I know Old Town, I think we're hoping to start maybe getting some bids out late this year. And so that means construction starts, later in 24. So these things just take forever. And that's the frustrating thing to me too, as a constituent. I'll tell you one thing. Yes, one of the first votes I took on County Council in January 17 was to fund the Mark Clark extension, or the widening of Mark Clark. Sure. And that project will be done next year. That'll be over 7 years to put a 2-mile road, extra lane on each side, a bike ped lane the length of it. 7 years. That is absolutely obscene. And that's a simplistic view of how long things take, because you've got to have, DHEC, OCRM, bird studies and wood studies, all this stuff. It never ends. And then once you get through all that, then you got to bid out the contracts. It takes forever, and it's very frustrating.
Wow.
But we keep pushing the best we can.
And how many bids do you have for the Old Town District?
Well, it hadn't gone out yet, so yeah, we're still acquiring right away, and it's advertising phase 1 by the end of 23. So that'll go then. So
I'm sorry, I meant to rephrase it like this. But how many bids do you expect from this project?
Well, we hope as many as possible. That keeps competition. Competition keeps prices down. So something of that magnitude, we may not get as many bidders. If we're just doing an intersection or a turn lane or something like that, we might get 5 or 6 different bids, because small companies can sort of handle that.
Yes.
But we might need some of our bigger groups to bid on these larger, Savannah Highway, Old Town Road projects, because it's a little bit more than some of these small companies can bite off.
Wow. So how much is the total project for all this price tags?
Well, let's see. Old Town's estimated right now at about 12. Savannah Highway, we don't have a number on that one. Sycamore, well, you can see right there.
Yeah.
650. Yeah, so that little intersection, widening that sidewalk in that intersection, $650,000. Just crazy. Yeah. So I mean, there's all kinds of things we've got out here. So, it just takes forever, and the price just keeps going up.
Wow. And I want to get back to the budget quickly, because I know the new budget comes, as you mentioned, raises for the county employees and funding for the county new public works building. So how many employees altogether will receive a raise?
Well, so everybody. The sheriff had given her department a raise, I think, back in the spring, and so the administrator with this new budget was able to increase everybody else's salaries.
Wow. So how many of those employees will be receiving a raise for the first time in, say, 10 years?
I have no idea. I think most everybody gets a cost of living increase just about every year if they're meeting expectations and things like that.
So and going to that public service building, what is the current amount of money that has been put towards this building?
Well, I believe the budget was $66 million to build it. Now, the ongoing cost to pay the air conditioning, pay the maintenance, I don't know what that number is.
And where would the rest of the funding come from?
Well, it comes out of our capital budgets.
Okay. And going back to those county employees who have actually received a 3% pay raise, when was that particular raise even applied to all of this?
When was it, or when did it go?
When was the last raise, I should say?
I don't know. I think most, as I said, most employees get an annual cost of living, some type of cost of living adjustment, but this was a more substantial raise for everybody.
And were there any performance or longevity adjustments?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Let me step back up and say performance is always a key. We do evaluate our employees just like everybody does. If somebody's not meeting expectations, and there's things that you do in the private and the government sector that handle that. But yes, there's longevity things that are in play there too.
Now, how many longevity increases will be provided to employees who've actually reached 20 or 25 years of service for the county?
I have no idea.
Okay. What's the average pay increase in the budget for employees?
I don't know that.
Okay. How many exceptions are there for budgetary purposes?
How many exceptions are there for budgetary purposes? I don't understand that question.
Any exceptions in this budget for this particular pay raise?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure I understand your question, but the budget we approved, that the staff put together, administrator put together, provided for the raises we've been talking about. So whether everybody got them or somebody was not meeting performance, didn't get them, I don't know the answer to that. As we've talked about, I mean, the council approves a budget, and then the administrator and the elected officials, the administrator and his deputies administer the budget. So I don't mean to be evasive or anything, but when you say, what's how many employees, I mean, we have council members don't get into those details. We just don't. And
where did the FY23 increase in revenues go?
Well, that's general fund. That's the increase. That's the increase from the 293, 294, whatever it was, to 315, 320.
Okay. And turning now to affordable housing. As we sit here right now, Councilman, can County Council actually be trusted to actually spend money on affordable housing after several sales tax promises in the past?
I don't think we should be in the business of that. I don't think county government should be in the business of that. Should we help land bank? Yes, we should do that. Should we provide subsidies to help people stay in their homes? I think we should do that. If we get a windfall like we did with ARPA, should we help people? Should we do things like that? Yes. Should we help with zoning? Absolutely. But should we have line items and provide housing like that? I don't think we should.
So what's the solution? What's your solution to helping those people with
Just the
housing?
things I just mentioned is, the grants to help people if in a simple world, if it's $1 million project and a developer has an $800,000 loan and they've got $100,000 in cash, can we come up with some gap financing, that extra 100? Absolutely. There's all kinds of levers we can use and pull to help doing that, but having a big slug of money sitting around for county council or any other elected officials to manage, no, not me. I don't support that.
So where's the gap financing now for some of these projects?
That's handled through some of our Christine Durant's group. I mean, we've got some monies allocated for things like that.
Wow.
And going forward, Quintin, and going forward, would I support, for things like that? Yeah, I mean, if we need to, ratchet up our zoning staff to look at more of these density projects, would I support that? Yeah, I'll do that. But, to put $20 million into what's this, these people call this trust fund, and then, then just go start spending it. No.
So let me ask you, how many density projects do you have in your district?
Well, there's several. Most of them are city. I'm not overly wild about some of them because some of them are built down Highway 61, which is a 2-lane road, and there's no grocery, buses don't run down there that often. Where you do density, as I mentioned, is Goodwood and Chuck E. Cheese and Citadel Mall. That's where you do density. And that's just in my district. I've talked with Councilmember Honeycutt. The old bylaws, the old food lines, those type of things. If we can incentivize, if we can keep hold a low tax rate, those are mechanisms we can do too. Is to give tax incentives. So you wouldn't pay if you're a developer coming in to build apartments or workforce housing or things like that. We might hold your tax level at a lower rate and make it more feasible financially for you to do that project. We can do all kinds of stuff like that. And I support all those measures, but just a big chunk of cash laying around, no.
So where's the tax level right now for most of the tax levels, what you just mentioned?
Well, I don't know that exactly. I mean, commercial, owner-occupied is the lowest. Your owner-occupied house is the lowest it can be. Yeah. If you own a house and you rent it out, it's a non-owner-occupied house. Your taxes ratchet up. There's higher tax rates for that. If you own commercial property, it's higher taxes on top of that too. So what the rates are for each of those, I don't know the answer.
Well, I appreciate you. Let me ask you these tough and complicated questions.
Listen, I'll tell you if I don't know the answer. I mean, like I said, council is, as I mentioned, county council is a governing body. Okay, we have a trusted administrator. He has a trusted staff. The public elects the elected officials, and so we're charged with setting those budgets. And so, again, I don't mean to be evasive, but I brought some of your interviews with Councilor Middleton, and he was the same. I mean, we just don't. We're not in those. How many people are moving to Mount Pleasant a week? I mean, those are numbers we just don't have. We set policy, and we hold our hired employees to the task of implementing those policies.
And I like to hold you all accountable. So thank you.
That's right. That's fine.
Well, Charleston County Councilman Brantley Moody, thank you for your time here on Quintin.
Pleasure to be with you again, buddy.
Likewise.
Yep.